All right, we're ready. I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to listen to this video and then have a talking discussion with us about the PowerPoint on December 14th. It really means a lot to us. This presentation is called Curriculum Ideas on How to Incorporate Anti-Racism and Diverse Lenses into the Classroom. My name is Cole Forbes. I'm class of 2011, and the other presenter with me is Will Nee. He's class of 2014. And we are just 2 of 8 members of the Curriculum and Educational Resource Group, which is a subcommittee of the BIPOC at Govs Alumni Collective. So even though it's only 2 of us presenting, we have had a lot of help, suggestions, and changes to this PowerPoint from the other 8 members that you'll talk to today. Organization.
Yep, and we're just going to talk about the organization of this presentation. So we're using a book as a template for the curriculum guide. We use the Faraway Brothers. So it's a book focused on immigration. This is just an example, though, and it's an example that you could swap out with any other book. And so the yellow slides that you'll see, that'll be just kind of the skeleton of being able to, insert that type of topic. And so we will continue from there.
So like Will just said, this book is called The Faraway Brothers. It's about 2 young migrants from Central America making their way to the United States. It has a lot of discussion about immigration policy in the United States. We feel that this book would be perfect for a sophomore year English class, not elective, because it works. You could do work with writing through personal narratives. You could touch on developing personal voice through this book, and then also it has a lot of SAT vocabulary words. And we felt this was important because we read through the curriculum guide, and these were highlighted in the English classes on page 7 through the course descriptions.
And just to kick off the skeleton, just trying to making sure that we're addressing certain standards that we see in the curriculum guides for governors, making sure that book lines up with that. And then again, having, just making sure that we'll be showing the main resource that's being used, which is the Faraway Brothers.
Perfect. So topics that are brought up in this book specifically, you'll see a lot on immigration policy, saying illegal immigrants or illegal aliens versus undocumented immigrants and why that's so important to not say those words. Students would learn about unaccompanied minors at the border and laws surrounding those. It touches on Islamophobia. You can have discussions on what it means to be an American, how elections affect immigration, and then students will see an inside look on life inside the detention centers. While we're reading this book, an important thing we want students to do, or that they could do, these are suggestions, is to have different accounts to follow through social media. So, for example, I have specific ones about immigration that touch on current events going on. One's an activist, and one is an immigration legal team. And then also I provided a movie, a podcast, and a court case article. So students have different ways through the media to digest what's going on through the book to help them understand more, and they can see current events, stuff that's happening to the day while they're reading this book.
So in addition to suggesting certain accounts, also allowing students to share their own accounts on these specific topics, asking them to share articles, books. I'm sure you already do that with your classes, but just again, extending it more to social media, even like TikTok, podcasts, stuff like that, just to enhance the experience for the students. And so we go into just emphasize skills for this specific topic. So again, as you're probably teaching in your classes, trying to develop a central idea with the focus and being able to support that. And then with the sophomore class that we have outlined, being able to develop personal narrative writing through that, even using digital media to enhance that understanding, being able and having students share that. Also diving into the nitty gritty of English classes, being able to interpret the figures of speech, analyzing that role in literature or text, and then the biggest thing, critical thinking. And obviously, these skills will be interchangeable depending on which level class that you want to incorporate this with.
Good. So we think that to start out this book and these conversations that you should do a journal topic, and you'll do this journal topic without teaching or showing any of the responses to the class. We feel that that would make it a more comfortable atmosphere for the student to share their opinions on the situation, on how they feel about immigration, for example. So this journal topic would be, what are your views on immigrants and immigration policy in the United States of America? And if the students know that these opinions wouldn't be presented to the class, they won't be embarrassed or they won't feel uncomfortable putting stuff in there, and then you'll get to learn where students are on this political point, and then it can help you with these discussions later on throughout the book.
So yeah, we have this first activity in place just for the teacher to gauge kind of where the students are at as they do this first journal entry, and they share that with just the teacher. It'll help you kind of basically facilitate a more constructive conversation in class, which we think is really important, and being able to further whatever arguments that are come up in class or any points, you can kind of gauge that from the beginning with this initial journal entry.
So, for example, in this book, I feel a pre-reading activity. So this is something that's outside of the book, outside of the text. So I provided a YouTube documentary. It's about 30 minutes long that details why a few Central Americans are leaving their country to go to the United States. They talk about the dangers that they know they might face. It shows them saying goodbye to their family. It shows them explaining why they're leaving. And it really will help the students who have never learned about this topic be able to think of it while they're reading and have a better idea of how important and how hard this decision is for immigrants to leave to come to the United States.
And just as a template to figure out this pre-reading activity, whether it's a text, YouTube video, podcast, interviews, movies, just making sure that that really enhances the student's experience.
So after you read the first two chapters, we think a better discussion that's less controversial is just talking about each student's definition of their American dream. The two main characters discuss what they think life is like in the United States. They think of it as this holy place with no problems, and it'll solve all their problems back in El Salvador. And hopefully throughout this discussion, students will learn that each one of their peers has their own definition of the American dream and what's important to them, and not one opinion is more right than the other, but everyone's is different, and that is okay.
And going back to the skeleton, just making sure that we nail down that first theme that we want to talk about. And really interesting, and I think Cole touched on this, was relating this to the students' lives and having them really invested in that core theme, which we will see evolve later with this curriculum guide. But the main point is making that connection between the student and the main characters.
And then another thing you could teach in this book specifically is the literary device and mood. The prologue, the author does a really good job of making you feel tense and nervous that these two main characters won't make their court case on time in the United States. That will reveal to them their status in the United States. So by the end of the first chapter, even though you've never met these two characters before, you feel nervous, you feel anxious for them. And this is one of those things you can teach to help their personal narratives and their 5-paragraph essays better in the long run by the end of the year.
And just a reminder, going back to the skeleton, whatever book you do choose to use in class, just keeping in mind these literary terms that we can use to enhance the students' education with the specific topic and the specific theme, and then being able to blow that out into personal narrative essays, 5-paragraph essays, being able to incorporate that.
And then by the second part of the book, you'll be about halfway through. This is where we can be a little more intimate and maybe have this conversation be a little more uncomfortable. Since you'll know the characters better, we would love to hear how the students would talk about these characters to their parents. So the discussion question would be, if you knew Ernesto and Raul, how would you describe who they are to your parents? And we feel that would be important now that we hope that the students in the class would start to develop empathy and sympathy towards the characters because they know more intimate details about their lives.
Yeah, and again, going back to the skeleton, this is just something to consider. This second part of the book is really important, and will really show like how these discussions evolve during the class, during the time of that curriculum is happening for that class, and it's a really good point to see like how these conversations are changing in the class, and you really see the growth of these students. And so keeping in mind for that second part of the book that you're choosing.
And then a third part, this book specifically touches on immigrants and the economy, and it brings in a lot of facts about how immigrants pay taxes, but they don't receive Social Security. So I think it would bring up things and information about immigrants that students may not know. And this is where another place where you can see if students' opinions are evolving since that pre-journal entry about the topic, because they have learned more about the immigrant stories and have developed feelings towards these main characters because of what they've read about their lives.
And again, going back to the skeleton, it is important because we know that this question, it is a little more controversial. I guess it's a little more of a hot topic for students in the discussion, but we're hoping that the personal narratives that the students are sharing and with what's happening in the book, that this can be a much more constructive conversation in the classroom. And so that's kind of the goal of that. And so just keeping that in mind for the third part of the book, and again, seeing how these opinions and how this conversation has evolved from the very beginning.
And then lastly, in the end of the book, you learn about how Raul and Ernesto attend a public school for free, and then you can just center your conversation, kind of like the last one, how students' opinions have changed if they feel strongly about this or they disagree with the idea of immigrants and even possibly undocumented immigrants being allowed to do that. There's even a court case you could bring up how the Supreme Court passed a law stating immigration status does not allow students to say no to children, that they have a right to free education and they have a right to education. So that's also just another way to gauge how students' opinions have changed throughout the book.
And just to make sure that we're capping everything off, considering final essay ideas. So for this particular book, we have ideas of like, what is your idea of the American dream? How do Raul and Ernesto depict these ideas of the American dream? Another one being, what have you done to achieve your American dream? How does this compare to Raul and Ernesto's perception and actions to achieve the American dream? And why do we buy into that idea of the American dream? And how does that compare to how Raul and Ernesto buying into it? Again, relating personal journey of each student to these characters.
And then once you've read all the books, you've done your 5-paragraph essays, you can be a little more intentional about the change of opinions from the students in their final journal entry, so they can also self-reflect. I think that's the most important thing. They're reflecting on how they felt from the beginning of the book to the end, through all those discussions, through all those writing topics, through this entry by saying, how have your thoughts about immigration and immigration policy in the United States changed since reading and discussing the book? So I think in reality, it's so the students are reflecting on this topic and how much they've changed is the most important thing for this journal entry.
And thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. I'm sure you're very busy and it's a very crazy time, this climate. But we appreciate your time and attention. Please feel free to email the subcommittee with any questions, or feel free to ask us during our meeting on December 14th. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.